Hello and welcome to the DC Studio Showcase. I'm Frankie Smith.
And I'm entertainment journalist Tyler Coates.
And welcome to our very first episode. It's going to be so lit here. I'm so excited.
I'm excited to be here.
This official podcast is presented by Max, and this is a series where we'll deconstruct and celebrate all the latest and greatest from DC Studios. Each and every episode, we'll be joined by our comic correspondent and comic book expert, Coy Jandro.
Hello, how are you?
Amazing. Coy is our wizard at the bridge. Okay.
Have you got the curtain?
Don't look behind it.
Don't look behind it. I think that's closer to a whiz. So he's a whiz type of wizard.
Yeah, he's a whiz.
Love it. But he's here to give us more insight into the characters that we'll dissect and into the stories that we're going to look into. But here we're going to circle up, talk comics, culture, feature exclusive interviews with A-list celebrities, talk with creators, break down and deep dive into episodes and movies and all that good stuff. But don't be intimidated if you're new to DC. Like Tyler, for the DC curious, this is for all levels. And this is the perfect time to become a DC fan.
Explain to me why.
We have so much stuff going on, and you guys are going to learn all about it here on this podcast. Each episode will drop every other Friday. And you can check us out on Max, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you can find podcasts.
Listen to us, watch us, maybe both.
I say both. I say both. You can get a real sense of who we are.
Exactly.
If you listen and watch us. But that being said, let's talk about the centerpiece of DC Comics, Superman.
Superman, yeah. Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, on December 7th will be available to stream on Max and just swept the 9th Annual Critics' Choice Documentary Awards. Obviously, it is a biopic of Christopher Reeve, the actor, the first Superman. But I think, and I grew up with that Superman. Like, he was the Superman that when I think of Superman, I think of Christopher Reeve.
That's the only Superman I really knew.
Right.
Was Christopher Reeve. And I actually didn't even know him as a person. He only existed as this character.
Right. And Coy, I think you have an interesting connection too.
I had a really unique experience with Superman. I love the comic books. I was raised in the comics. My parents both loved comic books, but I was -10 when it came out. They were 6 and 7, so I wasn't raised on this Superman. I saw Christopher Reeve as an advocate for the disabled first, Superman second, Robin Williams' friend third, and then I got to discover Superman later. So this documentary was really interesting for me in that it gave me the context of how the greater population felt about him as Superman, and then it kind of retroactively filled in my comics that I grew up reading, going, oh, that's a Christopher Reeve take, or this run with this art was inspired by this Dick Donner version. And it was really retroactively fascinating to go the opposite of how most people experience, like yourself. You see Christopher Reeve as Superman. I see him as the documentary did, which is the real hero he was, who played a hero.
Right, absolutely.
I think it's interesting that you knew Christopher Reeve as Robin Williams' best friend. I didn't even know they knew each other.
No.
I was shocked. I was like, they're that close. Like, they were close.
Good friends, yeah.
They were good friends. And I actually had the opportunity to watch a screener of Christopher Reeve, the story, with his family, with everyone. And we're watching it and we're all boo-hooing, like watching these pillars interact each other, have this like beautiful connection.
You know, again, like we know Christopher Reeve through the lens of Superman, but I think what's so interesting is that, you know, he was kind of the first superhero on screen at that big level. Obviously, there have been Supermen before and Batman before, but this was really the first like superhero movie as we kind of know it today. And I think what's really interesting about him is that, you know, he was a trained classical actor at Juilliard. He was nervous about taking this role, which I think today we would be like, why wouldn't you?
Mr. Reeve, it is very important that you become a serious classical actor. Unless, of course, they offer you a load of money to do something else.
I resent when people try to diminish superhero content or superhero roles. That scene where he's thinking about telling Lois, which they showed in the documentary, and he's Clark Kent, he takes off his glasses, he straightens up his posture. And I think that that's such great nonverbal acting that only someone who is trained can do.
So that was really interesting. Like, Christopher Reeve took it so seriously, and that's why Like, you can see that. And I think that, like, a lot of people didn't give him the credit for being such a good actor.
Yeah, and I don't think they gave him the opportunity after, right? It's like, we see you as Superman, and he talked about that was, I'm so sad to know that that was kind of his worst fear, right? He did this as a first role, as a stepping stone, and that's all he's known for.
So let me ask you, can you name another Christopher Reeve movie?
What do you mean, like Superman 3?
No. No, a non-Superman Christopher Reeve movie.
No.
All right. So I'm gonna recommend two.
Okay.
First is Remains of the Day, which was mentioned in the film. He has a small role in it, but it's a Merchant Ivory. Anthony Hopkins is in it. Emma Thompson. It's not like Superman. It's also a costume drama, just no tights.
What does
no
costume
capes.
drama mean?
So it's like costume drama is like very British, Oscar baity, you know, like Downton Abbey. I feel like is like the quintessential version of that. But the other one, and actually a movie I was obsessed with as a kid, was Noises Off, which I think like shows how good of an actor he was, a physical actor, which is about a group of people putting on a play, and they're all hooking up backstage. Tensions rise, jealousy rears its head, and like John Ritter's in it, Carol Burnett's in it, Christopher Reeve's pants are falling down. He's like such a good, funny actor, and like it just shows. I think like Superman, he was typecast, you know, totally, and like it overshadowed who he was as an actor.
What I really liked about this documentary is they weren't afraid to like really talk about his life, and I thought it was so tragic to watch his relationship with his son and just the enormous pressure of being Will Reeve. Could you imagine?
I mean, being that young when that happened to him, and then losing his mom not long after his father, I think was like really incredibly tragic, obviously. But again, I think that he follows in his father's footsteps by like persevering through it and like recognizing I have the opportunity to do something good for this world, and championing his activism and continuing that.
And he looks identical.
He
Looks exactly like him. So I couldn't imagine the pressure of having a father that is like the pillar of hope and inspiration and just this man that everyone loves, and then looking like him and having to continue that legacy. Because at its core, Superman isn't about his superpowers or being strong. It's about what he represents and who he advocates for, which is something that also Christopher Reeve did. And I thought that was incredible. Koi, there are comic books where like Superman loses his powers, right? And then what does he decide to do after, like with it gone?
Actually, a lot of my favorite Superman stories are about a depowered or a being depowered Superman, because it shows that humanity. And as we're talking about with Christopher Reeve, that humanity is what connects us to this all-powerful being. Two of my favorites ever are actually For All Seasons, which is this stunning story of how the humanity of Superman is so important, and All-Star Superman, which you'd probably recognize the art of because that's what James Gunn actually just put out as inspiration for his new Superman. It's amazing. And actually, as far as homework goes, right behind you there, both of those books are For All Seasons and All-Star Superman, two of the best Superman stories of all time, and they're about a depowered or a getting depowered Superman still having that integrity. And all of that, when I was watching the documentary, it felt like someone who's lived a certain way, had a certain power set, and he has to adjust to a new way of living, but he's always so good. There's always this wholesomeness to him. That's what a hero is. And the documentary wrecked me because the idea of someone who has boundless inability then being adjusting to a world that is not built for them is really
confining.
Yeah. I really love this documentary. It felt like I was watching a documentary about Superman as well, and I thought it was inspirational, and it really showed what type of man this was, and also the importance of the role that he took.
And I love that you talked about the integrity of Christopher Reeve, how much that's influenced everything today. We would not be at this era of superhero culture without Christopher Reeve. So he impacted the comics, he impacted people, he's still impacting the Critics' Choice Awards. It's really special.
I encourage everybody who's like Christopher Reeve, who's interested in the tea on Christopher Reeve, and who just likes really good documentary and to learn more about the cultural zeitgeist, to check it out. It's streaming on Max on December 7th, and it's incredible. We've all watched it. I say check it out. And it's full of hope. It's a great way to give you a pick-me-up. You know what I mean?
It's not a sad, tragic documentary. It's ultimately beautiful and hopeful because he did change the world.
Let's move on from that like really beautiful, inspiring story. And let's talk about the newest show that's coming out and like the worst people that we know in the DC universe, Commandos.
Creature Commandos.
I'm interested to know, as someone who's new to this entire world, what was your take on Commandos? What did you think it was about?
I knew kind of the general premise of the show, which is, a ragtag group of misfit monsters come together to save the day, hopefully. And I knew it was sort of related to Suicide Squad, but I mean, beyond that, it was all new to me.
What in the holy hell?
This is the Belle Reeve Non-Human Interment Division. For over 50 years, only those at the uppermost levels of security clearance are aware of its existence.
I've never heard of these characters before. And
Most people
Coy,
haven't.
I mean, right, Coy, I mean, that's where I turn to you as the comic expert. Should we know who these people are?
So there are comic runs of them adjacent, but this is definitely a different canon. Like there is a run from Grant Morrison that features Frankenstein that actually inspired Peacemaker and some of the villainous choices that were chosen in Peacemaker. There's a great Jeff Lemire run that has Frankenstein with some of these members, but even that's a different canon.
And it's totally different than what we've read. For the people who have read the comics, this is its own thing. There are only two things that you really need to watch or know. And even then, they explain it in the first 10 minutes.
Right.
That's the Suicide Squad and the Peacemaker series, which are both you can stream on Max.
There isn't a canon. Like, you don't have to have read anything to get all the enjoyment of it. And that feels like the format they're going for is, let's take these completely obscure characters, make them approachable, but tell the craziest story possible.
Right. I mean, is that kind of what you think James Gunn's vision for the future of this universe is going to look like?
Absolutely. And it's why I have been singing James Gunn's praises for Mountain Tops forever. I think that he understands how to make comic book content cinematic and interesting and fun, but still give it the gravity of these situations. These are like world-ending situations.
Yeah.
And his style is all over it, right? The fight scenes are so cool. And the sound design, the music was so cinematic that it just bleeds James Gunn.
Right.
And it's why everybody's like, he is going to be incredible. Every project he puts in is going to be amazing. And I think we kind of see that now. Coy, you have to tell us what the difference between Task Force X and Task Force M is. You have to tell the class.
That's actually a new canon to this story. Okay. So it's had a few variations in there, but the whole idea is to use monsters because that's fodder. It's collateral damage. So in this story, they're basically making it so Waller got a slap in the wrist so she can't use humans anymore, so they use monsters. And that is historically what the comics have done, whether it's in World War I with some of the characters we meet, whether it's experiments going into the future. And I think it's a really genius way to kick off something as broad as the DCU. If you start this weird, how crazy can it go?
I know you all aren't exactly enthusiastic about this mission, but...
General, I believe you've read us wrong. We're delighted to be here and delighted to serve our country.
Okay. Great.
So let's dive into these first two episodes, which are now available to stream on Max. I know sort of who Amanda Waller is, played by Viola Davis, great actress.
Yeah.
I love actresses. But so she's gathering together this group of misfits that include, a guy who's on fire, Frankenstein. I mean, what is her end game? What's her goal? That I don't know.
So that's the thing. Amanda Waller is messy, right?
Yeah,
And she kind of hides behind this whole thought of, I'm doing this for the greater good. And the big difference between the Suicide Squad, which is what you're referencing, where she takes criminals and she figures, okay, because they're criminals, no one's going to care. And she gets told not to, she moves to these monsters. But the tea is her daughter is the one who exposed what she was doing.
Okay.
So the reason why she's not able to work with humans anymore is because her daughter went on live and was like, yo, they out here sending out criminals. This is not right. This is not humane.
By using these prisoners, I think we can arguably circumvent our new restrictions.
Arguably? How?
Congress said we can't use human prisoners. These assholes aren't human.
I mean, these are characters who they're not even anti-heroes. They're openly villainous, a lot of them.
Yeah.
But we still kind of have to root for them. I mean, is that something that pops up a lot? in the stuff that you've read, like
Creature Commandos comics are interesting because they're inherently monsters. And what I think James Gunn does really well is humanizes things that we would judge otherwise. So in the Suicide Squad, these are villains that we're learning have more layers underneath them. And it's more about our perception of villains, whereas monsters, that's a terrifying entity. It's a full-on monster. So how do you find that different perception? And I love the idea of us using the found family idea that James Gunn does so well. And I think, speaking to what Frankie's saying, why this is such a unique vision is he does this uniting so well where we can identify with people we wouldn't normally be able to. So even beyond villains, literal monsters. And I love that James Gunn adds a musicality and he adds this fun fight style, because to me, the reason I love comics is you're directing the space between the panels. Like when you're flipping a page or when you're looking panel to panel, you're the actor, you're the writer, you're the director, you're controlling that. And James Gunn sees how to make that approachable, but still so nerdy. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, where people like me can be like, how did they adapt Creature Commandos? And people that don't know these characters can be nerdy with us, alongside us, going on this crazy journey, because family unites everybody.
right.
But to your point earlier, I do think that there's a trend where we're following people that we're like, these people are terrible, but I love them anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's this. I think that we're finding out what it's like to be misunderstood because of the way that you look. Unlike the Suicide Squad, those people did it. Like they on the Suicide Squad, they in jail because they were out here doing things they weren't supposed to do. And honestly, I feel like the Suicide Squad gets more chances because they're like attractive fighters.
Right.
Like, Harley Quinn be in and out of Arkham, they don't care. But like, especially like in the second episode, we watched the Bride story, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out, why is she in jail?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because she's a corpse. Like, is she a corpse? I don't know.
Well, no, she's a reanimated corpse.
Yeah.
She's like, is that offensive to call her a corpse?
I don't know. I don't know what the undead prefer us to say about them. Maybe that, just the undead. The people,
Because like, it's hard because she's in animation. But I wondered, like, how do people interact with her? Are they terrified when they see her? Does she smell? You think she smells?
Oh, she probably stinks.
Dang.
Dr. Phosphorus probably smells too, right?
I mean, he's just emitting radiation.
Weasel.
What is it?
Weasel smells terrible.
Yeah.
These are important things I need to know when I'm watching a show.
Yeah.
I am making joke. For a minute, I think you're going to make mess in your pants, huh?
I was never gonna...
Very close to messing his pants.
I wasn't even in the vicinity of doing that.
And I think one thesis that they're trying to push out there is like, what do we classify as humans?
Right.
Like the Suicide Squad, they are all criminals, but we still see them as human. They cast like the best looking people, like it's just Elba and stuff like that to be these criminals, and Margot Robbie, versus like these monsters who's like a corpse bride, a man who's on fire, radioactive fire, a fish woman, and
a weasel,
a
literal
weasel. Which, do you remember how he looks in live action?
I barely remember.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Is he more cuddly in this version for you?
I think he looks like he smells less. Like he looks like he stinks so bad. I'm really big on smell.
They all stink.
Yeah.
I bet Rick Flag smells good. He seems like a cologne man. He's got an aura.
He's got a musk.
Yeah. He
That's
seems
why
like
the princess was throwing it at him.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean?
That man doesn't stink if that much thrown at him. I'm just saying.
I think it was so great character building to see him decline a princess. You know what I mean? Like offer it to be like, I have a job to do. And I was like, that's right, Rick Flag. But also like I felt connected to the princess because I was like, same. You know what I mean?
Can we also commend Rick Flag's performance? Like what Frank Grillo's doing, usually you cast voice actors in voice roles, but we're having these actors develop into their live action counterparts depending. Like we had Viola Davis in live action first and animation, but these are going to be our live action version, our video game version, our animated version. Each one of these actors is absolutely slaying as their animated selves. And voice acting is such a different tool than acting. So what Frank Grillo's done so far has been insane as someone known for his on-screen acting.
It's a gamble. It's a gamble to cast across boards. And I mean, how did you feel about the performances? Like, were you sold on all of them?
I mean, I loved all the performances, but I think that's what I was excited about. I'm not necessarily an adult animation person, but I mean, again, like Viola Davis, Indira Varma as the bride, and Zoe Chao as Nina, Alan Tudyk, who is like
He's
a king of voice.
He's the king of voice acting. We can't use Ali.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't mention him. I'm like, he is
example.
the man
But
for this.
David Harbour is Frankenstein, Maria Bakalova as the princess. So like, it's like a good, solid group of actors.
And I think that adds into the entire experience. What I love about animation, particularly this animation, is it feels like it can go to depths that live action may not be able to.
Yeah.
And these are all very super powered individuals, and they do such a great job because they have full control of how we see it at power scaling, like fighting.
What do you mean by power scaling?
So like figuring out who's the strongest, like scaling and listing out like strongest to weakest. Who's the strongest person on the Creature Commandos?
How would you rank that?
Let me look through
Like
it.
Phosphorus?
Like who would, right? You would say that Phosphorus is the strongest.
Yeah.
I would say the bride.
That power structure thing, I really like that because I think a real way to see into this is the eye line that is our regularly powered person. I love that Rick Flag is kind of our eye line into all of this. And what you said about monsters, I think is so true. It's an evolution of perception. Like they didn't necessarily. We don't know what they've done except for be who they are. And what's more ostracizing than being judged without even doing the crime? Necessarily. We're going to find out.
I am not human.
Oh, stop with the bluff, fish. You're the only one of us freaks who is. We're monsters. You're a human being with gills.
The world does not see it this way.
Well, when has the world ever been right?
I think they do such a great job of showing like how they're almost discriminated against, right? Like we see in the Suicide Squad that they did what they in jail for. Like we like, all right, well, I guess you can rehabilitate. But in this case, I feel like, especially when we get to the bride story, we get to see the human side of it. And because this is a series, they have the room to really flesh out the characters in the way that we don't get in the Suicide Squad because there's only like 2.5 hours.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, so we really get to know it. The fight scenes too made me know the characters a little bit more as well, right?
Okay, how? How do you mean?
That first fight scene with Dr. Phosphorus
which is
and
crazy.
Rick Flag Sr.
That is ultimate. That is truly
It's a crazy scene, honestly. And it was a couple of things. I was like, thank God Rick Flag declined the booty, right? Because he wouldn't have caught Dr. Phosphorus in his room if he was out, you know, getting tail.
Yeah.
So I was like, that resolve made sure that he continued his job. But also Dr. Phosphorus has powers. Rick Flag does not.
Right.
You know, he's at the disadvantage. And the entire time, even when he's like getting burned and things like that, I felt like he never lost his cool. And it was such a like hardcore fight. While I'm watching it, I'm anxious for Rick Flag. I'm like going, ooh, every time like he's touched and I know it's burning. And I was like, Rick Flag Sr. may actually win this one.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that you need animation to do.
Yeah,
like you can't
yeah,
see
yeah.
that would never work in a live action the same way.
When that sizzle off the bird,
Yeah.
when he was like grabbing his hand, I was like, oh no, every time.
But even like my favorite fight scene, and it was really a montage, was in episode 2, The Bride and Frankenstein.
Right?
That just like follows them throughout the years. I thought that was incredible.
It was like a motion comic.
Yeah.
Do you know what a motion comic
No, I don't know.
is?
What a motion comic. I said yes. Like,
You're like,
yeah.
yes, I love it. No, a motion comic is like taking panels from a comic book and kind of layering it and doing some voiceover. So it's like you're watching it. I love motion comics. And even when I'm reading comics on my own, I like to read it on the app because I can go picture to picture. And so it's like watching things almost animated. And I felt like that where this frame was the same, but they were fighting in different areas. And so we got to see them through the years, her run for like a century.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, those are characters that I knew way from outside of DC. Obviously, Frankenstein's monster was introduced by Mary Shelley in her novel, and then I think became kind of American pop culture figures. But, you know, they're just monsters and they're not characters really. So I think that this was really interesting to like give them a fully fleshed storyline where you recognize like why they hate each other.
Yeah.
I mean, he stalks her for centuries.
Do they hate each other? She hates him.
She definitely hates him.
But I don't think he hates her.
He's in love with her. I mean, it's a symbiotic. Well, it's a symbiotic relationship. He thinks he is. He's told he is. And I think that like
Yeah, because my
he
man was on a
believes
yacht.
everything is
He wasn't even thinking about her, right? He was on a yacht. I was like, why are you terrorizing this woman?
Right.
And I think they did such a great job of showing the difference between those two fights, right? Like when we watched Dr. Phosphorus fight Rick Flag Sr., that fight felt like, I don't know, two brothers kind of hashing it out.
Yeah, it was like very macho.
Yeah, like let's clear the air. And even when they were done, right? Rick Flag was like, "Stop playing." You know what I mean? Like he was like, "We're over. This is done." But when we were watching the bride fight Frankenstein, there's a fear there, right? She's being chased.
Yeah,
pursued. She's being stalked and chased, and even that fight scene, they're not fighting. She's running and trying to stop him from chasing. And that's how you add in character development, like how you color in who these characters are. And I love that balance of the two of them.
I also think it's important, like you mentioned, the fighting style shows who they are as people. Like Phosphorus could have killed Rick Flag immediately. Like he's radiating pure energy. He could phase through if he wanted to. So the showing of restraint in these monsters, and that humanizes them in their own way. And even the formatting, which I touched on a little before, but it being something that is kicking off a universe. That first episode is so different tonally from that second episode, and it makes me wonder how much each episode is going to feel like an individual comic, where we get the introduction to everyone. We know we want to like them, but how do we like them? And then you unravel them each episode as you go. And when you finish a graphic novel, there's a sense of that family, there's that sense of community, there's that sense of team, but we've never really seen it with monsters because they are not meant to be in one contained thing. They are inherently violent at each other. So I think it's a really interesting swing to put us together and throw us into the deep end with one human eyeline. Like just Rick Flag is our identifier. The rest, monsters.
I mean, I think television, just like the narrative storytelling element of it, episodic television especially, like it's very much like the comic storytelling process, I think.
So as like a fancy cinema guy, how does this compare? Like watching this animation, did you feel like you were watching, I don't know, like Casablanca or something? Like were you like,
it's a little different than Casablanca for sure, but a little less colorful, a little more colorful.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think I can see a lot of like reference points. I think that like this idea of like, as I said, like getting a team together, like a misfit group of people who have their own tensions and complications, they're going to butt heads no matter what. I mean, I think a lot of Westerns like Magnificent Seven, which is based on Seven Samurai, a Japanese film, which is about like a bunch of like cowboys basically, or samurai from the original, who are kind of given a task by this town to come basically save them, to like protect them from this like group of villains, which I think is kind of, Seven Samurai is kind of like the narrative like acorn, I think, where you can find that kind of grows into a tree, where Creature Commandos is on the branch somewhere. But even like, Freaks, the Todd Browning movie, which is about like basically sideshow freaks at a circus. We would probably use different names to describe them today if that movie were coming out, but that's about like interlopers, like two like con people trying to like take advantage of, I think, like one of the little people who are part of the circus, and like all of them band together to take revenge. So I think that like that, I think that that's a beautiful thing when, I mean, it's kind of scary at the same time, but like I think that's what make people relate to these type of stories, where you have so many different characters who can represent so many different things.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is a perfect gateway for someone who wants to be in, or who's interested in animation. Because like growing up, I'm a 90s baby. Anime, which is Japanese animation, was always like put on this pedestal as like something that adults can enjoy.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of animes that are very adult. And I love that we're starting to explore that side here with American animation. And I think Creature Commandos is that perfect sweet spot where we have these adult themes, adult language, and it just feels cinematic on the way that anime is. Like there's an anime called Akira, and there are so many films that are based on scenes in
Absolutely.
Akira.
I mean, it's kind of like a storyboard at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, and I think it also, like, I think what sets this apart from a lot of animation we see is that just the movement is so big and bold and beautiful, and it doesn't feel like I'm watching like a static panel that someone's just kind of like walking across, you know?
Absolutely. And there's a comedy to it too, which is another signature of James Gunn, where there's a serious fight going on. But because these are people, right? They're not humans, but they're people. They have these human moments where they make a mistake, something happens, and they're like, oh shit, right? Like the floor falling from beneath Dr. Fire, throwing fire all over a wood spot.
Yeah.
You think they'll charge them for that damage?
I feel like no one ever gets charged.
How do you build Dr. Phosphorus? Where do you send the check?
You build Amanda Waller and them, right?
Yeah, she has a budget. Like, she's a special budget set aside.
Yeah,
there's an insurance policy.
I would definitely charge Rick Flack Sr., especially if like he declined me earlier. That invoice is coming, okay?
I also want to zoom out to the macro of animation in speaking of billing, but we're looking at a universe starting, right? So I think it's really interesting to use animation as the kickoff, going from comics into animation and knowing these characters are going to also be in live action. But we also see like a frame of like live action in the animation in the cell phone. There's like, I think it's Zac Efron. There's literally a frame of live action. So we know that this universe is going to be multimedia. We know we're getting live action. They just announced that they're going to be using puppetry and dynamic duo. So that movie, as far as I know, is puppetry, live action, CGI, and blending animation styles. So I think it's really interesting to start a universe in animation with just a sprinkle of live action. I'm curious if that continues, if other media gets involved. And I think the idea of like, when you look at a comic book, an inker can change how something looks and a different penciler can do a panel. I think it's going to be really interesting when we zoom out in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, the multimedia element of what the DCU becomes by starting in this adult animation and adding little other elements. What's the great tapestry? What's the quilt of the DCU going to be going from comics into all this other stuff? And how are we going to see media differently after this?
Yeah, it's such a creative and I want to say unprecedented way to attack, especially I think including video games is such an ambitious thing to do. And I think it's going to be so immersive, right? To be able to explore and see this world from so many different aspects.
Sounds like Creature Commandos gave you hope.
It gave me more than hope. I am a DC stan. I've grown up. I was born into this darkness, which is a DC reference, you know.
I got you.
And it'll give you hope. But what I love that DC at its core and what Creature Commandos is at its core is looking into human behavior, human interactions, and then they add on to these things.
Right.
You know?
So it's human first for you, superheroes,
everything else.
Magic.
Just like Christopher Reeve, Superman.
If you guys haven't seen it, watch Creature Commandos. I'm sure we spoiled a little bit for you, but
even I recommend it.
Yeah, even you recommend it. And this is the fanciest guy I know, okay? The first 2 episodes are out right now. You can stream it on Max. And be sure to watch Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve Story, which will be coming out on December 7th.
Be sure to watch us every other Friday. We're available on Max and YouTube, and you can listen to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.